Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the World Wanderers podcast. Today, we are very excited to share what was really a fun interview. We are talking with Mike Corey. Mike is a YouTuber, a BBC television host, a filmmaker, and you can also add podcaster to that resume as well. And he has traveled to some incredible places around the world, and we dive into some of those adventures today.
Yeah, and on this episode of the podcast, we start by diving into Mike's travel story, how travel became such an important and integral part of his life. We talk about where he's been over the last little while. We talk about his decision to start traveling again in 2020. And also we talk about Tanzania, which is where he joined us from. And Tanzania is a pretty interesting country at this current moment. So he's got lots of interesting stuff to share with us. And if you want to find Mike online, you can find his YouTube channel at Fearless and Far. And then he also just launched a brand new podcast called Against the Odds, which we are very excited to check out and hear what he's talking all about. So we hope that you enjoy this interview as much as we did. And without further ado, here is Mike.
Welcome to the podcast today, Mike. We're really excited to have you here with us today.
Excited to be here.
Where in the world are you joining us from?
I am currently in Arusha, Tanzania, right in the foothills of Kilamunjaru.
Wow, that sounds pretty amazing. We've heard that Tanzania is a good place to be right in this present moment in 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and what it's been like over there?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what it's like first, and I'll tell you what I came here for. I arrived here at the very beginning of the year, early January, and no one has masks. So I found out after a while that the president and the health minister both declared that the COVID does not exist in Tanzania. And therefore, it's impossible to get a positive test, because if the health minister and the president both say it doesn't exist, who's going to be the one to say they're wrong? And so life is just about back to normal here, it seems. It's a little bit crazy. Of course, you can't say it doesn't exist. Of course it exists. But everyone here just is living their normal life, which is a crazy thing in this this point on the planet Earth. But that's just the climate here in Tanzania. So I'm here because I had an invitation to climb Kilamunjaru. And for me, at least, I think as a traveler, your risk assessment changes a little bit. And also your baseline comfort with risk is a bit different than the average person as well. So me being a healthy, youngish 35-year-old, have decided to continue traveling. And I had an opportunity to climb Kilamunjaru. And I said yes, partly because I need travel to stay mentally healthy. But also because I realize there's a small opportunity now or soon or this year to be able to see some of these wonders of the world that are normally completely flooded with thousands of tourists, basically empty. And that was the situation for Kilamunjaru. We just got back a few days ago, and we were the only ones on the summit. We did a bit of a different route where we summited in the afternoon instead of the morning, but still, we only saw one or two other groups, and it was phenomenal. May I add that for my YouTube channel, Fearless and Far, I like to challenge myself. I learned early that if I kind of push into my fears and the things that make me uncomfortable, that I grow a lot. And so some of the challenges I put myself up to are a little bit strange, including this one, which was carrying a watermelon by hand to the top of Kilamunjaru. And I won't say whether it was a success or not. The video is going to be released in a few days, so probably definitely when this goes out. But that was an interesting challenge as well.
What made you choose a watermelon as opposed to other fruits?
That's a great question, because, like a mango or a banana would be much more convenient, right? I guess I was just thinking, what is comically large, and that was definitely was comically large and something that's fairly easily accessible in Tanzania. And luckily, I got here during watermelon season, so there was a lot to choose from. And I settled with a 15-pound baby that I named Walter Melon. And that guy rested on my shoulder. He didn't handle the altitude very well.
Imagine the
But
freezing temperatures also.
Exactly. All the locals thought I was crazy because normally you go there and there's porters that help carry things, and they all wanted to take the watermelon. Like, why are you carrying a watermelon? And I was like, don't touch it, because I wanted to maintain the fantasy. Like, I could just put it in my backpack, right? But like my camera gear weighs even more than that. So what's the fun? So I really wanted to carry it on my shoulder or like in my hands the entire time, and I did. And so, yeah, it was an experience. Definitely one I'll remember, and definitely not easy. By the way, Kilimanjaro by itself is not that easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's funny that you're there right now and that we're talking to you from there, because it had to be, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago, we were kind of thinking like, oh, it'd be an amazing time to climb Kilimanjaro. Tanzania sounds like a very interesting place in the world to be right now. And like you said, a time where normally you're doing that hike and there's people everywhere. But now it'd be kind of an incredible time to do it if you can do it. So that's really neat to hear, and we're excited to check out the videos. But I'm also curious, are you going to be in Tanzania for a while, or what happens after?
Right. It's a bit strange right now because I don't really know. You have to kind of be dodging lockdowns and also entering countries that are possible, but also not traveling too much because I don't want to, walk my dirty feet around the world, if you understand what I mean. So the plan is to do longer trips. So before the pandemic hit in early March, I had already been to like 10 countries, like Bangladesh, Mauritania, a lot of these places that people don't normally go. I travel 11 out of the months of the year, out of 12. I'm always on the road. I have the YouTube channel. I have a television show. I'm a host on BBC as well for the travel show. And so my life is always just spinning around and filming. But this has changed things. You can't really do that. Number one, because of regulations, and number two, just because of ethics. Like, you have to travel differently now. So what I've been doing is trying to spend a month or two in each country. So we got here just about 2.5 weeks ago, and I'll be staying until the end of the month. So the month just began. So that'll be about 2 full months or just shy of that by the end of it. Then after that, it's probably off to Turkey, where I'm going to sit down and kind of see what happens in the world. The interesting thing is, like, so right now, you needed I didn't need a PCR test to enter Tanzania. But I did need a PCR test to transit through Europe to get to Tanzania. So I still had to get that before leaving. They wouldn't let me in, even though I didn't need a test to get in Tanzania. I'm thinking what's going to happen here shortly is that if they can force PCR tests on people to board planes, they're probably going to start forcing vaccines as well, for people to have these luxuries of things like travel or whatever else. So the plan is now to go to Turkey, and settle in for a little bit and kind of see what happens in the next few months with the role of the vaccine, what it means for our industry, if things are going to change, if there's going to be fights and debates. And I think it'll be an interesting show, what's coming up next in the few months regarding all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and just it's kind of a weird time, I think, for most people in most industries. But I think you brought up something that's really interesting. Like, you travel 11 months of the year, which it's really hard to travel 11 months of the year right now with all the restrictions and how fast things are changing. Do you keep a home base somewhere? Do you have anywhere that you kind of call home or anything like that?
So I was born and raised in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, on the East Coast, right above Maine, actually. And I mean, my parents still have the house there. I was back for Christmas. I usually try to come back for like a month or so during the year, either at Christmas or in the summer when it's really nice. Fredericton in Canada is a beautiful spot. The whole East Coast is really nice. Halifax is nice too. I really love it there, but I don't have a home. I lived in Mexico City for 3 years. I had an apartment there. That was probably the closest thing I had to a home for the past 10. But for me, it's been pretty much fully nomadic. And I'll park my butt down with a laptop somewhere, and that'll be home for a month or two. But normally it was always traveling every few weeks, recording something for someone. So, but now it's changed. And honestly, like, while it's difficult to travel now, and being Canadian, like right now, just a couple of days ago, right, they locked down basically Canada. If you go back in, you have to pay $2,000 for 3 days quarantine. Then you still have to quarantine for 14 days. And the government asked Air Canada to stop flying to beach destinations. I can't imagine having a home there right now because I would be stuck there. And at least with the pandemic, while it isn't easy to travel, I have no necessity to go back right now. So I can kind of find a pocket that makes me happy with some beach or some sun or some jungle or some mountains, and at least get a taste of that thrill. And my entire life, I've been a curious person. I have to have that in my life. If one thing I learned earlier in 2020 when we were all stuck is like, I need challenges. I need freshness. I was to the point where I was sleeping upside down in my bed every second night because that was just the freshness I needed. I wasn't used to sleeping in one same bed all of the time. I'm in a new bed every 3 days. I was starting to go a little bit crazy. So for me, I need the freshness to stay happy and productive and, all these things. And so I guess I'm happy I don't have a home base anywhere right now. It might sound like a crazy thing to say, but I can still vagabond myself around to whatever's open at this time. And that's actually another point that I should probably talk about too, is like, I am choosing to travel, but I think there's also a matter of who's affected. If I want to do these things with my life, that's fine, right? Like it's my life, my body, but who else is affected by my actions? And I think if we are going to travel now during the pandemic, you should be doing extra things. Like if you don't require a test, still get a test. If you're going to go live with the tribes of the Amazon or here in Tanzania, get a test first, or if you enter somewhere and you work on a laptop, like I do, quarantine for a week. Why not? It's work week. Taking these extra precautions, I think, is the ethical thing to do. I don't think we can't travel, but I do think we have to take these extra things in account before we start bouncing around the world.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's all sorts of there's definitely like a responsibility that comes along with it. Like you said, like if you're a young person and you're traveling, don't go hang out with old people. Don't go to local communities that are kind of disconnected from healthcare. Take a test, or if you start to feel like any symptoms of anything, stay home. Don't venture out and abroad. And like you talked about, taking that time to quarantine it if necessary. I think all the types of things that are responsible to do. And you had a video, I think, a little bit earlier on towards late summer, early fall, when you were starting to travel again, about kind of the decision-making process going into it. And I think it's something that really gets overlooked, especially in a lot of the discussions that are going on in the mainstream media these days around travel, where people are, the image that's being represented and the narrative that's being told is one of basically the only type of travel is irresponsible people going and partying and beach destinations. But it's completely overlooking the other side of the tourism industry, of all these countries where tourism is, the lifeblood, how people put food on the table. Can you talk just a little bit about how that contributed to your decision-making process as well?
Yeah, sure. So I was, at least in our industry, one of the very first, if not the very first, to publicly announce that I was going to be traveling again. That was June 2nd in 2020. And that was because the EU had just opened to Canadians for non-essential travel, aka tourism, was okay. So I wasn't breaking any rules. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I was doing something controversial by choosing to travel as a tourist to Europe during the pandemic, right? But I guess my approach to that was a bit like the movie 8th Mile, where the final, this is kind of a funny comparison, but in the final rap battle, we have Mr. Slim Shady, who's rapping against some other guy. And these rap battles are about dissing each other. And how he won was by dissing himself so much, or talking about all the problems that the other guy didn't have anything left to say. And I think with the approach for me there was listen, I know this is controversial. I know there are people who are going to get furious and say all kinds of negative things. But I started that video explaining my why with what I was going to be doing to be able to make sure that I wasn't putting anybody else at risk. So again, I didn't have to test. I didn't have to quarantine. But saying and also doing these things in the video, in the follow-up video, but also in the explanation video, showing that I was actually doing these extra things to make sure that I had my bases covered. And the last thing I want to do is infect other people. That's reckless. It's stupid. It's a horrible thing. So I had that in mind, and so I led with that. And with anything in this world, there's people who are going to come in, make their judgments and leave. And there's your fans who will understand you and they get you. You're not trying to do anything, but you have to make sure you explain yourself often and frequently. And so that's been my approach ever since. And it's So not like I think in the beginning, it was very interesting talking about essential and non-essential travel. What is essential? Like, is coffee essential in the morning? Is sugar in your coffee essential? Like, what is essential, right? Like, is happiness essential? Is love essential? I had a girlfriend in Europe that I hadn't seen in 4 months. Is that essential? Like these things, like my job is travel. Like, without traveling, I can't do anything. Is that essential? Like, it was an interesting debate that I had with my audience and whoever wanted to pass by and throw stones, but it was an important one. And now things haven't changed that much, but I think people can see there's different kinds of travel. One of them is going, to Cancun for a wet t-shirt competition, getting smashed on tequila and, making out with randoms. And the other is what we're doing, which is a bit more purposeful and a bit more tactical and considerate, right? And they're very, very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea of essential and non-essential has been one that I've really struggled with throughout this whole thing. Like when it comes to essential and non-essential travel and even essential and non-essential business, I just feel like any business that brings you your livelihood and puts your food on your table for you and your family should be essential because it's essential for you. So I feel like that is, yeah, it's pretty essential. Like it's just a weird sort of situation that we've gotten into. And I definitely, hear you and agree with you when it comes to this travel thing. And it's one of the things, we're Canadian too, and we're in Mexico. So we're effectively stuck in Mexico, which is quote unquote stuck. It's totally fine. We're safe. We're happy. We'll be here for the foreseeable future. But it's like, is our travel essential? Is it non-essential? Is the travel of other people essential, non-essential? Like, do we really need to cancel flights like to and from destinations just because some people want to take vacations? Like some people need that for their mental health too. And not everyone has the ability to be able to do what we do. Like some employers won't allow it. Some people don't work from home. So there's a lot of considerations, I think, around this entire discussion.
When I first started traveling, I didn't know whether or not I would be accepted. I didn't know if I'd land in a country and then the locals would be like, oh my God, foreigner, COVID, yuck. But it really hasn't been that way at all, except for when we were in a remote part of Germany, kind of road tripping through, and we stopped for lunch somewhere, and the locals looked at us like we were aliens. But besides that, like in places like Tanzania and Peru and all these countries like Indonesia, Bali, what are the locals are desperate right now. And we're not really talking about that. Like here in Tanzania, everyone is just so stoked to see us when we showed up and wanted to do the Kilamunjaru hike, and everyone was just so excited to have work. They were saying like we were doing treks like every couple of weeks as much as we could, only with a couple of days off, making lots of money. Everything was good. And all of a sudden, poof, like the world imploded in 2 weeks. How are you supposed to find another job? Like these guys had no other options. And whoever thought tourism would stop globally? And so everyone here, at least, and I saw the same thing in Romania and Turkey and these other places that I went. People are just happy to have work because they don't really have the luxury to quarantine. That's something we do because we have, savings and the government helps out and we have these cozy houses and everything. But in some parts of the world, they live by the day, like if they don't go out and do a private tour or no one comes and buys the pierogi or something at the street stand, there's no money coming in. And tourism was such a massive thing for so many people. And now these people have nothing. In the very beginning, like in probably April, I had a friend of mine in Cambodia who was an amazing solo guide, private guide, that we worked together a couple times, one of the best. And I was like, oh, the dude's in for big things. And so I was like, oh, you should make a website and you should, instead of working for someone else, you should work for yourself. And that's how he turned into the private guide. And he had the successful business. Him and his brother had like an Airbnb and they'd take people out. And then he messaged me on WhatsApp in April. And he's like, Mike, I don't know what to do. Like I have to work a construction job. I'm sick. I have 3 kids. I can't support them. Can you help me at all? And like, what am I supposed to do? Like I sent some money, but I can't support all these amazing people that I've worked with my entire life. And this guy did nothing wrong, just tourism, just kerplunk in 2 weeks. And he's one story out of, I'm sure, hundreds of millions of stories that are all very similar. And these people are just happy to see tourists and get a bit of money in their pocket again, because for a lot of them, they're having a very hard time right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is important to highlight it because I know it's easy to forget the other side of the equation. We think about like travel, we think about tourism, and we think about like fun vacation times or adventures. But like you said, for so many people, this is like living, this is work, this is how they put food on the table. I know here in Mexico, like with kind of the new testing requirement to the US and then Canada putting in this one, it's like just an incredibly massive shock to the economy. And it's not, it's not the hotel companies, like CEOs and rich people who are affected. It's like the people who work in restaurants, who work in hotels. Like those are the people who are getting laid off and fired. And like you said, private guides, entrepreneurs, all those people who are really, really like struggling to fight through this year. And then it's like just out of nowhere, all these policy changes make it so much more challenging. So definitely think it's important to highlight that. And then maybe we can put a little bit of the COVID stuff to the side. I'm curious for you, like just going through your travel history, you've gone to some incredible places and lots of places that are off, definitely way, way off the beaten path. How did you kind of start, I guess, straying further afield when it came to your travels?
Yeah, great question. We'll take it way back to the beginning. I've always had this mentality that there's misunderstood things and misunderstood places. And if we simply just take the time to understand them, then we'll realize that they're actually pretty cool. And maybe that's because I was misunderstood for the majority of my life. So I had some sympathy for these things like snakes and scorpions. And I remember as a kid, I would just look underneath rocks and logs and find salamanders and spiders and just really try my best to convince people that they're really cool. If you just give them a chance, look, yeah, I know they might be a bit scary, but let's learn about them. They have 8 eyes and wow, it can breathe through its skin. And I always really enjoyed that because I just realized that there's lots of things in this world that we make a snap judgment about, that we don't have the right information. And if we just take the time, the world's a pretty freaking cool place. From the small little things and then even the big things like countries is what I grew up to have the same attitude with, uncovering these places, because we hear bad things about all kinds of places in the world. But like what I like to compare it to now is like if there's, we can use the States as an example. Like let's say there's a shooting in Seattle. Are you still going to go to Miami? Yeah, of course you are, because they're a whole country apart. But then why do we not think that way for other countries as well? So if there's an issue that happens in some far corner of the Philippines, why are we scared to go to the north? Like the logic kind of breaks down a little bit, right? Because we don't have very many data points for these countries. We hear one thing about one place, and then all of a sudden the entire country is dangerous, even though there's like 100 million people there. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was finding these places that I misunderstood and then teasing them out and learning more. But it's not something you can just show up and do, right? Because there's some legitimately dangerous places and things in this planet that you don't want to just jump into without knowledge. But again, it's taking the time to learn. And just like a spider or a scorpion, Turkmenistan, Bangladesh, Mauritania, these countries, you can travel to them safely. Just do your research first, right? Not every single spider is poisonous. And things like, I don't know, like, and some dogs can hurt you. It's just an understanding, putting the knowledge in to understand what the real risks are. And honestly, we don't do that enough as people. We just make snap judgments. And that's just our DNA. It's how our brains work, right? And that's it. And it's just, for me, being able to make these countries work was a lot of research first, but mostly trying to find a good connection. So finding a local person on even Airbnb, or for the case of Venezuela, for example, going there in the heat of all that craziness a couple of years ago. A lot of that was actually a friend of mine who lived in North America that I went to college with, and he moved down there, and he's a white 35-year-old dude like me, and he was motorbiking around Venezuela and living there. And he'd been there for 2 years, and he's like, dude, if you want to come down, I can't promise you that everything's fine, because obviously not everything's fine, but I know the country well enough to be able to probably make sure everything's going to be okay. And I trusted the guy. He's a smart guy, good common sense, well-traveled. And so I went down there with an invitation. And that's how it's been for all these countries. With an invitation, with someone who knows the situation, who can tell you what it really is, and not just, Googling the most recent news articles. Someone who actually knows what it's like on the ground. And from there, magic can happen. But you do kind of have to have an in sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm curious for you, was there like one country that really like drove that recognition home? And I guess I'll kind of explain for us. I remember the first time going to Colombia, which is funny to look back on now because I think of Colombia and I think like totally safe, easy to travel, all that stuff, tons of tourism. But we went back a number of years ago. I remember reading, you go on like the Government of Canada website and like the travel warnings, which I mean, I guess I probably like legally shouldn't be like, don't read them, but it doesn't really help because you'll just think you're going to get like murdered, kidnapped, beheaded, etc. And going there, and then like you get there, you travel, a month later, you're like, man, I can't believe how afraid I was. Did you have kind of an experience like that with one country that made you kind of realize that, hey, a lot of these places are a lot safer than we think?
Yeah, well, my intro to travel wasn't the normal thing. I guess like I had gone to some all-inclusives in Mexico, but that doesn't really count, right? Because you're in basically a bubble. My first like solo trip wasn't to Paris. It wasn't to, any of these normal places. It was to an island called Hoga off of the Wakatobi Island chain, off of the island of it's called Bhutan, but different Bhutan, off the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia. So like island off an island off an island off an island in the middle of nowhere. And I was kind of, it's a long story, but I didn't ever really plan to go by myself. I had a friend of mine, we had like saved money. We're supposed to go together. He bailed last minute. I had to go by myself. I was terrified, showed up in the middle of nowhere. Like I was so scared. Like I was like, I don't know the language. I don't know the food. Don't know anybody who's going to be here. I have to be here for 3 months. It was for like a research volunteer position for marine biology. And I just had all of these ideas of how dangerous it was going to be and how I couldn't believe I was going by myself. I said like goodbye to my parents, like I was never going to see them again. And then proceeded to have like the best 3 months of my entire life. Learned that you can eat things like bat. This is kind of topical for right now, but like, I guess you grow up in a world where you think like everything, you think the lens that you have is the right lens. You think like Christianity might be the best and main religion. You think maybe like we only eat pig and beef and fish, and that's like all there is to eat out there. There's bananas and apples, but like those are the only fruit you can eat. And then you go to some place on the other side of the planet with a different religion, and there's actually more people there who believe that. They think peanut butter is disgusting. They drink like sap from a tree that you didn't know you could do, and everything just changes. You're like, oh my God, maybe the lens that I have of this world is not right at all. Like, who's to say whose lens is right and whose is wrong? And so for me, going to the other side of the world and living on this small island and it not being dangerous and everyone being friendly, people said like, oh, you don't know where you're going? Indonesia's dangerous. There's tsunamis, there's typhoons, there's a tourist kidnapping like 15 years ago. Aren't you scared? And I was scared. And then you go there and you realize like all these people who gave you all these warnings have never been there. They don't know anything. And so why are you listening to them? Luckily, my family's always been super supportive, but I had friends and friends of friends who thought I was crazy and I was like gonna get kidnapped or something. But they, of course, it's like asking a baker for car advice. These people don't know anything. They're just, I like to say they're like re-gifting their fears to you. Someone gifted it to them, whether it be a news article or a TV show or their mom, and then they just give it to you. It's like a hand-me-down, a fear hand-me-down. No one has any experience, but they're just throwing it at you, and it sticks because with humans, like fear sticks with us. It's how we ended up being one of the top animal on the planet. Is we're fearful. We protect ourselves. We run up a tree. We defend. Right? We're fearful things. And so these people who give fears to us, they stick. And once I realized none of that was true, then I started to pry deeper and deeper and deeper. And for me, on a more personal note, I realized that I was also scared of being in the spotlight and public speaking and being noticed. All these like deep childhood traumas that we all have. Were affecting me as much as these misunderstood fears of the world. And that's where the Fearless and Far brand came from, was like diving into these fears, these misunderstood things and understanding them and therefore, growing beyond them. And that's the brand and that's the travel style.
Yeah, that's really incredible to hear. And I can relate to a lot of what you just said. And I think that there's probably people out there too who hopefully are hearing this and remembering that, fear is normal. And part of what travel can help us with is to push through that and understand that at the end of the day, we're all humans walking this planet. And it doesn't matter like what our skin color is or what language we speak or what food we eat or what religion we believe. We're like still just a human deep down. And it's one of the things that I've come to really love about discovering new cultures is to feel that connection with somebody who's so different from me and to understand a little bit more about where they come from and that type of thing. And I think that when you can have that really human experience, then the people that you're I guess like interacting with become a little bit less like quote unquote scary.
Mm-hmm. We all just want to be appreciated. We all just want love. We want to feel safe. All these things are exactly the same. And you're right. If you don't travel, you don't realize these things. And you think people in China are so much different, or people in Uzbekistan are all the, different religion, different language. No, that we're all the same. And you realize the world is kind, so kind and loving. And people will go out of their way to help you when it makes no sense. And it's incredible. And that's also why I like these destinations, is because the places that don't see that much tourists, like for example, Mauritania, when I was there at the beginning of 2020, we had to fight off people inviting us for tea. Like there was just, it was endless, the amount of people who wanted to invite us over for tea. And to the hospitality was like inconvenient. And we had to get a little bit started ignoring people because like they were just so excited to see foreigners there. And that's hard for us to picture growing up in the Western world, that people are just so excited to see you. They want to share their culture. They want to share their food. They want to share their home, their time, all these things. So generous because they're just so excited that someone's here appreciating it, right? When most people just discount them. Traveling in Pakistan was the same way. People there are just so generous, and it's incredible the amount of love and hospitality you get from these people. And they're all the most prominent thing making YouTube vlogs is a lot of them said, like, they looked at the camera that I'm filming, like, we're not terrorists, okay? Stop calling us terrorists. And they're really passionate about that, their world image being so stained. And yeah, there are, again, Pakistan's not the safest country, but it's by far not the unsafest either. And again, there's some problem areas, but you can travel Pakistan, no problem at all.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, and something that I think we've thought about as like there's kind of this natural. I mean, when you're doing anything, it can be this like chasing the dragon type of relationship with things, where you do things, it turns out to be safe, so you do more like a little bit more dangerous things. You stray further afield, like you keep going, and it's like kind of like that parable with the turkey of like the day before Thanksgiving. It's like, well, I've lived 364 days and nothing bad has happened to me yet. Little does the turkey know the next day is the bad day. How do you kind of like take precautions and like make sure you are staying safe and like know when like, oh, hey, this is actually like too risky, I don't feel comfortable? How do you kind of draw that line for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm mislabeled as reckless often, but anybody who's traveled with me or is close to me knows that I obsess about planning. Like I think, was it Tim Ferriss who called it fear setting? Maybe he wasn't the originator, but it's planning, not planning for things to go wrong, but planning in case things will go wrong and then expecting them to go right. That is me. For all of these places, these countries, these activities, these festivals, these pseudo stunts that I do, I really think about, okay, so what could go wrong and how can I stop that? How can I manage that? How can I make a system in place? How can I plan in advance? What can I do? What can I bring to make everything go as fluidly as possible? I obsess about that kind of stuff. And I think that's how it has to be. To this day, like, I also train very hard. Like, I do jump training and strange activities like breakdancing and jujitsu and all these, not to like for self-defense, but just to be on, like, balance myself, know my body, being able to roll. Like I really love these activities because all of this is just making me as life-proof as possible, as experience-proof as possible, knowing that sometimes I kind of feel like I am chasing the dragon. That I like being on the edge of my comfort zone. I really enjoy that feeling because I know I'm growing there. But not to the point where I can't control the circumstance. Let me give you a bit of a difference. So For example, I buried myself in sand up to my neck for 24 hours at the beginning of 2020 in a beach in the Philippines, because I'm a little bit claustrophobic, and claustrophobia can't kill you. But the amount of days I thought about what could go wrong, like the tides, like sunburns, like what if a crab comes or a dog comes, or what if there's parasitic worms in the soil, like all of these different things. And I was cutting off circulation. Like I spent days planning this to make sure that I would be safe. I can control most of those things. Therefore, I did it. For example, something where I couldn't control, that was dangerous, where I had to call it in the middle of it, was a particular festival in Mexico called the Bulls of Fire Festival. The bigger festival is the Mexican International Pyrotechnics Festival. And as you can imagine, as a pyrotechnics festival Mexico is, it's not very safe at all. It's pretty fucking dangerous. And on the last night, they have this particular event called the Bulls of Fire. And it's beautiful in a lot of different ways. So these communities or in groups and villages get together, and they build these like bigger than car paper mache bowls with decorations and these big steel rebar frames, and they're on these wheels, and they push them through in a giant parade, and they blow smoke, and it's really, really cool, all the shapes and cool designs they make. And it's a really big sense of pride. And then at dusk, they wheel them into the square one by one, and they light them on fire. And what you don't know, unless you did your prior research, is actually they're filled with fireworks, filled with model rocket engines, some like commercial fireworks, some like more recreational fireworks. Basically, they're exploding bombs. And it's like, if you took the running of the bulls in Pamplona and you filled those bowls full of fireworks, it's like that. So these drunk men push these burning bowls, shooting fireworks at you in every single direction. Okay, so that's crazy. But I had the proper equipment. I had like an exit strategy. I knew where I was. I didn't drink. Like I put all of these precautions in place so I would be as nimble and as quick and like protected and being able to film this and experience this with minimizing the risk. Then, after capturing some really incredible footage, a bottle came spinning out of the darkness and hit me right in the sternum, an empty tequila bottle. I can't control that. I can see where the bulls are. I can stay sober. I can be aware. I can get my shots. I can take care of that. I can't take care of tequila bottles spinning out of the darkness and smashing against my skeleton. And that's when I called it, because I can't control that element. I trained very hard to be able to control a lot of things, but I could not control that. And so I called it. And whenever it gets to the point where I feel like I can't control what's happening, then I bow out, because I think that's a very defining point of when someone can get hurt very badly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing those stories and just kind of talking us through that differentiation and how you make those decisions and that type of thing. One thing we would be curious to know about is if there's any countries that are sort of misunderstood, I guess, from your experience, where they're often in the media said to be very dangerous. People don't often travel to them, but you would recommend like, yeah, you should give this a shot, do your research and maybe be open to visiting this place.
Yeah, well, after traveling to 70, 80 countries, and again, some of the stranger ones as well, I still like where you guys are in Mexico. I think Mexico is one of the most absolutely fascinating places in the entire world. We were talking just briefly before we started recording how the more time you spend there, the more interesting it becomes. And everyone thinks it's like, Cancun and that whole situation. But it's so much more than that. The history, the people, the cuisine, everything is just so incredible there. And I was so lucky to spend the 3 years traveling around, and I left, and there's still a handful of things that I hadn't had a chance to film yet. Like, for example, in a city called Pulque, which I believe is very close to you in Merida right now, the Day of the Dead festivals, the locals take the bones of their ancestors out of the graves and place them on the sides of the road and dust them all off with paintbrushes and things for Day of the Dead. And so you can walk, and they are very proud of being able to clean the skeletons of their ancestors next to the side of the road. That stuff is like fascinating, right? Because it's like it. First of all, it's just interesting culturally. Second of all, like our interpretation of what should happen after death, and our comfort with death in the Western world is very different than Mexico, right? Day of the Dead is an interesting celebration where you spend time remembering your dead loved ones, and you celebrate their life, and you do the things that they liked. You play their favorite music, you eat their favorite food. That's really cool. Instead of just throwing someone in the ground and kind of forgetting about it. I really liked that. And yeah, like Mexico's fascinating, and the more you travel in that country, the more you find just these unique, beautiful things. Another of my favorite things in that country is a drink called pulque, which is not tequila, not beer, anything like that. It's this fermented cactus sap beverage. You can find it around Mexico City. And the story there is really cool. It was like the after work drink for the working population in the 50s, and also like the drink of the emperors of the Mayans, like the kings. They used to drink this fermented cactus sap that is so thick you have to stir it with a paint stick and it just globs off. And so that was like the number one drink. And then the beer companies came in, saw that there was this drink in this like after work with the boys niche. And they spread all this disinformation, these massive disinformation campaigns saying they ferment pulque in poop barrels and it's dirty. Look at this beautiful, clean glass of beer. It's so clean. Look at the glass. Wow, amazing. Pulque is gross. Drink this. And it worked. And so pulque kind of fell off the map. And this is a little bit of resurgence of this strange, like frothy, sticky, almost like okra, that stickiness that okra has, kind of like that. But really cool, really, really cool. And I love finding things like that, these interesting little pieces that are hidden away. I get addicted to them. And that's why I spend so much time in the country.
Yeah, definitely can't second that. Or definitely can. Really strong second to that. We both love Mexico, and it's so diverse, so wide ranging. And so many people, I think, get that like taste of it, or at least it's almost like a feigned taste of it because they go to a resort somewhere. But like you said, like getting out from that area, it's just so much interesting stuff going on from the central bits of Mexico to northern areas to the Mayan, Yucatan Peninsula parts of it. So much interesting stuff happening basically everywhere, which is why I think we've been so attracted to it. And especially as Canadians, Americans, you can get here so affordably, so easily. Sometimes you can get back to your own country affordably and easily too, but not right now.
Yeah, may I add one more? So at the also the beginning of 2020, my girlfriend and I went to Oman, which I never really was on my radar. I knew it was a country only because the name is kind of memorable, and I heard it was okay, so we decided to go and didn't really know what to expect. We heard it was like the Switzerland of the Middle East, so safe and well established, and had like the best time ever there. And the country's beautiful and it's incredibly safe, and it's very Islamic. Too. So there's like beautiful mosques, and most people spoke English, which was also super strange, but it was not touristy literally at all either. It was this weird mix of like a lot of really amazing things, but not touristy at all. Like it had all the comforts of being like a tourist friendly place, but there's no tourists there. Anyway, loved it. And so that deserves to be on everyone's list. I know probably for a lot of people, they're hearing about it for maybe the first time, but that is a very cool country and very, very underrated.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it was already on our list, and we'll definitely push it a bit higher once we're able to, go places again. I think that this is a good place to start wrapping this up. Mike, it's been really wonderful chatting with you. I know you mentioned before, so you're going to be in Tanzania for about a month and then heading to Turkey. Do you have any plans for the rest of 2021, or is everything pretty uncertain and just kind of flying by the seat of your pants / following border openings and closings, et cetera, right now?
Yeah, so I do have plans for 2021. I'm going to stay still for a little bit in the next month, mostly because I'll be training for a marathon that I'd like to run. But it's not going to be the normal way to do a marathon, I guess, in the same vein as this Kilamunjaru watermelon trek. And so I'll add my own little twist on that. I think I mentioned already that during the pandemic, I realized I have to challenge myself. I need these things in my life. And the plan for 2021 is having a new challenge every single month for the entire year. So for January, it was a bit of a mix. It was learning how to fly an FPV drone, which is like a whole different world than a normal DJI drone. Oh my God, but you can get some really fantastic footage. Then it's the Kilamunjaru hike, which is completed. Next will be learning to free dive and also getting ready for this marathon idea. And then also for 1 week a year, I learned that they put a landing zone next to the pyramids in Egypt, and you can get your skydiving lessons and skydive over the pyramids. So that's also going to be on the list, pending any COVID confusion and borders. But that's, I need these things. And also the guy who speaks about fear should probably learn how to skydive.
I love it. That's amazing. We are excited to follow along on your journey. And I would love if you could share where people can go to find you, where they can follow along, check out your videos, all the good things.
Yeah. So my online alias is Fearless and Far. Not because I'm fearless. I just really like fighting them. So you can find me on Instagram and YouTube. Those are my two main platforms.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanders Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.